Welcome again, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute. This is the APSIA presentation with the United Nations Secretariat on career opportunities for young talent, particularly the Young Professionals Program. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to put any questions that you may have in that chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And our wonderful speakers will take whatever questions you have at the end of our conversation. So my name is Carmen Mazzara. I serve as Executive Director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, or APSIA, as we call it. We're delighted to have this session for students and staff at our members and affiliates all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the globe. We're delighted to have you here. This presentation is being recorded and will be available afterwards. And at the end of the presentation, our colleagues have some contact information as well as some social media links if you'd like to stay in touch with them and follow up. We are delighted to be joined today by Nanaya Kumi. How'd I do?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Who is, of course, a distinguished APSIA alumna, and Julie Weintraub, who we like anyway, even though she, I don't think, is an APSIA alumna, who will be speaking to us about the different career opportunities at the UN Secretariat. Again, as I said, for those of you who've just joined us, as we go through the presentation, please feel free to put any questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will take all of them at the end. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to our colleagues at the UN.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to Carmen and to APSIA for hosting us for this presentation. We want to welcome everyone to the webinar today. As Carmen said, I'm Nanaya Kumi, and I'm currently a junior professional officer at the UN Secretariat here in New York City. I started here at the UN in November of 2016, and I've been here with the Talent Outreach Unit since January. I always thought it was an impossible dream to work at the UN, but I did not know that there were so many different entryways and pathways to work here. So we are very pleased to be sharing some of those pathways with you today. And with that, I'll introduce my colleague. My colleague Julie will introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. So I am Julie Weintraub, here also in the Office of Human Resources Management of the UN Secretariat. Specifically, I am in the examinations and test section of OHRM, and I'm the team lead for the Young Professionals Program exams team. So I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about YPP and kind of shine a light on what the process is and how it is a very unique and exciting recruitment opportunity for young talent into the UN.
Great. Okay, perfect. So this is the agenda that we will be sharing today. We'll start with just talking about the UN and the staff that work here and why the UN started. And then we'll go into an overview of some careers at the UN and opportunities for young talent. And then the majority of our presentation will focus on the YPP program, where I will hand over to Julie to discuss more details about that program. And then we'll end with some Q&A. Sorry, we're just having a few issues navigating here we go. Okay, here we go. So, sorry, give me 1 second. So I'm sure as APSIA members, several of you already know that the UN was founded in 1945 after the Second World War, when several nations around the world decided to come together in order to prevent the possibility of ever having another war of that scale again. And since the founding of the UN over 70 years ago, the organization has continued to strive to tackle global challenges. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the work that the UN accomplishes every day in order to maintain international peace and security, to promote economic and social development, and to promote and protect human rights. So most of you are already very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, as all of you play an important role in learning about, promoting, and advocating for these goals at your colleges and universities, and helping all of us to achieve these goals by 2030, which is why you may also have heard the SDGs referred to as Agenda 2030 or the global goals. What you may not realize is that there are more than 30 different agencies that are helping to achieve these goals every day. And you'll see a few of those in the next slide when we show the UN organization chart. And some of these organizations that you may have heard of before that are all UN specialized agencies, funds, and programs are the UN Development Program, also known as UNDP, which helps to coordinate all of our and lead all of our development programs in the field. And they really focus on goal number 1 and really all of the SDGs. You may have also heard of the World Food Program, also referred to as WFP, which really focuses on goal number 2, zero hunger, or the UN Population Fund, UNFPA, which focuses on good health and well-being, UNICEF, quality education, UN Women, gender equality. So as you can see, there are many different agencies, funds, and programs throughout the UN system that are helping to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, along with all of you as individuals and NGOs and governments as well. And there is an app that all of you can download. It's called the SDGs in Action app, and it has actionable steps that each one of you can take every day to help the world achieve the SDGs by 2030. So we highly recommend that for those of you that are interested in doing more to take action, that is one step that you can take today. So this slide may be confusing upon first glance. However, it provides an excellent overview of the complexity of the entire UN system, or what we like to call the UN family. The immediate family would consist of the UN Secretariat, which is where both Julie and I are from and where we currently work, which includes the main departments of the UN, such as the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, the 5 regional commissions, and the Department of Management. Then you have the other principal organs, such as the Security Council, which I'm sure you hear about every day in the news, as well as the General Assembly, which is the only organ where every single one of the 193 member states has one vote. Then you have all of the agencies, funds, and programs that we were previously discussing in reference to the SDGs, which include the UN Development Program, UNICEF, the World Bank, and the UN Environmental Program. These are all like the second cousins of the family. And the reason why it is important to understand the complexity and the vastness of the UN system is because for any potential organization that you might be considering applying to, it's really important to understand how that organization fits in within the UN system or family. as many of these different agencies, funds, and programs, and there are around 40, they all have their own dedicated career websites as well as hiring procedures, which are different from that of the UN Secretariat. So that's why it's important to understand all of these different organizations and how they're connected within the UN system. So at the UN Secretariat specifically, we have around 40,000 staff globally, with around half of those staff working in our field missions. Most of you probably have seen pictures of UN peacekeepers and identify them by their blue helmets. However, civilian staff are also hired as international civil servants in order to support the field missions. And some of these positions that we have civilian staff in are supply chain and logistics, rule of law, as well as administrative professionals. There are currently 14 peacekeeping missions around the world, with the newest field mission being MINUJUST in Haiti, which was established last year in 2017. And Liberia was the most recent mission to close this year after successfully completing its mandate. So one of the myths or misconceptions about the UN is that we just look for international development or humanitarian professionals. However, we do offer jobs across 9 different job networks and 47 job families around the world, including in fields such as IT, communications, organizational development, and even aviators. And we generally have around 1,000 vacancies that are posted every year. So these are just a few of the diverse roles that we offer across the 9 different job networks. And you'll see that legal affairs, social affairs, and statistics are all highlighted here because those are the job families where we will have openings for the Young Professionals Program examination, which Julie will talk about later this year. But important to keep in mind that we do have openings in every single type of field you can imagine, from aviation to human resources and safety and security. So there are really positions for people and professionals in any kind of background within the UN. So the UN offers very attractive benefits for young professionals, including competitive salaries, flexible work environments, and family-friendly policies, including home leave, meaning that if you're serving outside of your home country as an international civil servant, the UN will pay for you to go home and visit your home country every 2 years in order to keep those ties and connections with your family and your friends abroad. The UN also offers generous maternity and paternity leave policies, including 16 weeks maternity leave, as well as learning and development opportunities throughout the year. And all UN staff are eligible to take free language classes in any of the 6 official languages at the Secretariat, as well as have the ability to live and work around the world. The UN also offers an education grant for those that have dependents in college or university and pays a portion of those fees. And there's also a mentoring program for the Young Professionals program as well. And one of my favorite quotes from our chief here, Surin, who always says that you might not become rich by working at the UN, but as an international civil servant, you will certainly have a rich life living and working around the world. So now I'll speak briefly on some entry points that you might want to look into before my colleague Julie goes into further detail about the Young Professionals program, which we'll be launching later on this month. And the first program that I'll be talking about is the Junior Professionals Officer Program, which is to provide young professionals with the opportunity to gain hands-on experience in the field of multilateral cooperation through a learning experience and to contribute to the advancement of their organization's mandate, particularly with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals. And with the JPO program, you are actually sponsored by your country of citizenship. National officer myself, being sponsored by the US. And the Junior Professional Officer program is currently offered by around 16 donor countries around the world. And various agencies do have JPO programs, including UNDP and UNICEF and UNFPA. And the JPO program generally lasts for around 2 years, and some countries do offer the ability for extension of a 3rd year as well. But it's an excellent program that I highly recommend to gain hands-on experience within an international organization. And JPOs do serve around the world as well. And then we also have the language competitive examinations, and the UN organizes competitive examinations in order to recruit language professionals, which would include editors, interpreters, translators, reporters, in order to fill posts in language services. And these are referred to as language competitive examinations, or LCEs. The UN internship program is also another opportunity for a learning experience of the day-to-day work at the UN that can last anywhere from 2 to 6 months. Eligible applicants have to be enrolled in their senior year of a bachelor's degree program, or they can be in a master's or some kind of advanced degree program, or within 1 year after graduating from any degree program. And internships are available across all of our duty stations. Then we also have the United Nations Volunteer Program, which offers opportunities in developing countries around the world, and also has a web-based virtual volunteering platform, not only to work on projects for the UN, but also offers professionals for NGOs, governments, and other public institutions in order to involve online volunteers in various development projects around the world. And then, of course, we also have mid-level opportunities in all of the 47 job families that were indicated earlier for anyone that has a minimum of 5 years of experience. And there are currently around 4,300 of those mid-level opportunities within the UN. So these are just a few of the many entry points into the UN. However, I'm now going to hand over to Julie, who's going to provide more details on our main recruitment program for young professionals.
Thank you, Nanaya. All right, so what is YPP? The Young Professionals Program was really started from a resolution by the General Assembly as a new recruitment initiative to rejuvenate the organization. So any young, motivated professionals who want to begin their career within the UN, this is a great way to start. It is open only for candidates from un- and underrepresented member states. I'll get a little bit more detail into that in just a little bit. But essentially, YPP consists of an entrance examination. And that entrance examination consists of several parts, which I'll also discuss in just a bit, and then a professional development program once successful candidates start their career with the UN. So it is different from applying to any other types of jobs. So we have just refreshed our microphone. Can you hear us now? Excellent. All right. So, oh, thanks for all the responses. Very helpful. Okay, so what I was just saying, really, I'll go back for a brief second to make sure everything was captured. YPP, just so it's clear, when one applies to the job opening for YPP, you are not applying to a specific job as you would with any other job opening. What you are applying for is an opportunity to participate in the entrance examination process and then to ultimately be placed on a roster of successful candidates who can be then recruited into the entry-level positions. And I'll explain that a bit more as we go on. Just kind of wanted to lay the foundation for understanding that YPP is separate from applying to one specific job. So we just have some examples here of some of our candidates that have been successful through the YPP exams process. As you can see, they are individuals from all around the world that have ended up in many different job families. So as Nanaya explained to you earlier, it's helpful to understand that the UN has jobs in all the different kind of occupations that you can imagine, and therefore we offer YPP in all of the areas. So you'll notice when YPP job openings go out, they will be specific for, also as Nanaya mentioned this year, legal affairs, social affairs, and statistics. And then each year we offer the exam in a different job family or area. So I want to show you here, I mentioned right at the beginning that YPP is open for nationals from member states that are underrepresented in the UN. So each year we identify exactly those countries that are not represented or are at risk of being underrepresented. So for 2018, there are 65 participating countries. And you can find this information on the YPP careers portal. And, you know, this is being recorded, so this will not be your only chance to see. But again, these are the 65 countries for which, if you are a national of, then you are eligible to apply for YPP. There's just 4 basic eligibility criteria. So the first being that nationality of the participating member state, which we just went over. Candidates also must have a bachelor's level degree, 3-year equivalent in an area that is relevant to that specific exam area. So as I mentioned, for this year, it's going to be legal affairs, social affairs, and statistics. In the job opening, we will outline the many different fields of study that have been identified as relevant for those exam areas, and candidates must have at least a 3-year degree in one of those areas. Another eligibility criteria, again, as this was established as an initiative to help rejuvenate the organization, candidates must be 32 or younger within the exam year. So as long as you are 32 before December 31st, 2018, then you are eligible to apply. And then finally, the last basic eligibility criteria is fluency in either English or French. And something that's just very important for you to understand if you are an applicant or advising an applicant is that when completing the application in the UN system in SPIRA, it will ask for fluency in 4 elements of language: reading, writing, speaking, understanding. And so the candidate must indicate fluency in all 4 of those areas to be considered as fluent in that language specifically. So it's important that as you are completing an application or advising somebody on how to complete an application, that you really keep in mind these 4 basic eligibility criteria. And while you'll see here, there's no work experience required, we do encourage you to make sure that if the individual has work experience, that it is detailed in their application. And I'll get into that in just a bit. So again, I mentioned for 2018, the exam areas will cover social affairs, legal affairs, and statistics. And I see a question that just popped up in the chat, so I'll go ahead and answer that now. I think it's a good time. So there is not a running schedule in advance of what the different exam areas will be for future years. And that is really because each year we do a litmus test essentially across the organization of what vacancies are anticipated over the next 3 years. And based on the organization's needs and its readiness to participate in preparing the exam and what the existing roster situation is, that is how we determine the exam areas. So while they are offered in somewhat of a cyclical nature, every 2 or 3 years you will see this similar exam areas repeating. We do at the start of the year kind of reassess what exactly is needed. So what you'll see here under social affairs, legal affairs, and statistics are just some of the degree areas or some of the functional titles or areas that an individual can work in by participating in specifically these exam areas. So I see a question here that I will go ahead and answer. At this point, I mentioned that the basic education criteria was a bachelor's level degree. And if individuals do have higher level degrees, obviously they should include that in application. For that has over 40 candidates that meet the first hurdle, we take a second screening, and individuals that have higher level degrees will get more points on their application. Individuals that have fluency in more of the UN official languages will get additional points, and those that have work experience in a relevant area will also gain essentially additional points on their application. So that was why I had mentioned it's important to make sure that you complete your application thoroughly. So for example, if you are from a country that, you know, a smaller island country that typically has fewer applicants, as long as you meet the 4 basic eligibility criteria, you likely would not need to have any of these further additional points added onto your application to be able to proceed in the process. But to make it a little bit more fair and balanced across the different member states that are participating, for those that have high volumes of applicants, the additional languages, work experience, and education points are used to help filter down so we can even out the number of applicants that proceed throughout the process. And there is a question also about the broadness of the exam areas. So, for example, the social affairs exam would cover the many different topics, and you'll see this listed out in the job openings once they are posted later this week or sometime next week is when we're anticipating for the job openings to go out. And so the exam itself will cover across the different topics. There are often opportunities for individuals to select one question over another, so that if you have, for example, more background in gender equality than you do in economics, there might be an opportunity to choose either to respond to a gender-specific question or an economic-specific question, and then the candidate chooses which they would prefer to do. But it is one broad exam for that specific area, for social affairs, for legal affairs, and statistics. And it is written at really a foundational level because this is an entry-level program. We're not expecting individuals to have a depth of knowledge in any one of these areas, but there should be a strong foundational level of knowledge in the area. And then for any more questions about the specific degree areas that will be accepted for the exams, I will just again say that this will be covered in the online application process. So this is just a little snapshot for you to see where you will be able to go to apply. The job openings will be featured on the careers portal, so careers.un.org. If you go to, there's a Young Professionals Program page specifically that you can visit, and it has a lot of information on there about the process. I will just say at this point, though, that site is being updated because, to answer one of the questions that has popped up, all of the exams for 2018 will be conducted online. So this is a very big change that we are excited about. This was piloted last year, and we now feel confident that we can roll it out for all of the exam areas. And I'll get into a little bit more of what that process is going to be like in just a minute, but we'll continue kind of talking about the application process at this point. So one thing that I just want to make sure is clear for everybody, as I had mentioned, the specific degree areas that are considered relevant to be eligible. This is a screenshot of where you'll be able to enter that information. So in the job opening, you'll see wording around candidates need to select their main course of study and also their field of study. So this is the spot where you would do that and add education details. So again, it will be very important that you read the education section of the job opening clearly, as it lists out specifically what main course of study are eligible and what field of study are eligible. It also indicates that if you don't see your specific degree title in this list, that you should select the one that is most most similar to the one that you have completed. Therefore, again, just make sure that you are looking at the list in the job opening when you are selecting these main course of study and fields of study, because those listed in the job opening are specifically the ones that will be accepted. Just a couple other tips on nationality. There are, on completing the application, so I'll start with the nationality one. There are a couple different places when you are completing your application on where you can select your nationality. And there are individuals that do have dual nationality, for example. So you will want to make sure that for your main nationality and nationality for the application, that you are selecting one of the 65 participating member states if you are in fact a national of one of those 65 participating member states. There are oftentimes candidates that have, if they're working here in the US or have moved to the US, they might have dual citizenship. We would encourage that if the candidate has citizenship or nationality with a country, one of the participating Okay, so we've refreshed the audio again. Thank you for the quick notification since we don't understand when it happens. All right, it looks like you can hear us. So I was just quickly saying that for any individuals that have dual nationality of US, for example, and another country, that their application for YPP, they should select nationality for the other country so that they are not competing with a higher volume level of candidates from that country. Hopefully that makes sense. You'll need to also just make sure that you slow down a little bit while you're reading the screening questions, because this obviously will have an impact on whether your application is screened in or out. So just make sure that you are reading those questions carefully. For the education, we would suggest that you do not select other. Again, if you don't see your field of study or main course of study, select the area that is closest to the one that you have, and then fill in the exact degree title in the open-ended spot. So for work experience, and seeing some questions, which I'll address right now as we are talking about the work experience for applications. Again, work experience is only going to come into play when there are a high volume of candidates for a specific exam area from any one nationality. So you'll want to make sure that you do explain what the work experience was and how it was relevant to that exam area. You still want to be as precise and succinct as you can. There are different point values associated for internships, for part-time work experience, for full-time work experience. So internships do count towards work experience, but they are counted at as the same as a part-time work experience would. And really it's the same for many different types of work experience, and levels are different point values. So just be as honest and forthcoming in your application, and know that your experience will be considered equally across the board for other candidates. The system itself recognizes what has been entered as the different types of work experience. So as long as you are able to enter it into the application appropriately for it to reflect your experience, then it will all be considered accordingly. And again, just a quick reminder about the fluency in all 4 areas of the language. You want to make sure that that is completed carefully. Research experience is another element where if you enter that in as work experience, it will be afforded the same recognition and different points again for each of the different types of experiences. So now a little bit about the examination process. As I mentioned briefly, the exam will be offered for the 3 different exam areas online this year, which we're very excited about. It allows a lot more accessibility across the different nationalities and for everybody, regardless of their location, to be able to take the exam. And the 2 main content areas of the exam are a general paper and a specialized paper. So the general paper will be the same across all of the exam areas. It assesses candidates' written communication and ability to draft a summary paper, essentially. Then the specialized paper will be specific to the exam area themselves, and it will assess the substantive knowledge in those fields. The specialized paper consists of both multiple choice items and then what we call constructed response items. These are longer open-ended responses where we will ask you a question, put you in a specific work situation and ask how you would respond. You would draft an email or talking points, for example. That would be a type of format that you would see in the constructed response item. So because the exam is now going online, it is actually going to be offered in 2 stages. So the first stage will be offered in October, and that would be the multiple choice items from the specialized paper plus the general paper. So candidates in October would take about a 2-hour test for anybody that meets that basic eligibility criteria. And then based on the results of that first stage, candidates would be invited to participate in the second stage, the constructed response items. So there will be a lot more information about how the exam will be conducted online and the 2-stage process. We will have that on the YPP careers portal, but as I said, that site is being updated as we speak. So for then anybody who is successful on the 2 stages of the online exam, they would go forward to the oral exam or the interview. All of the interviews are conducted remotely via Skype or WebEx, so there's no travel required for that. And that would really conclude the rigorous examination process. So I see a question here about, can you take the exam in more than one area? And unfortunately, you cannot. So while there is some overlap between social affairs and statistics, and I could see how that would be an opportunity that might be interesting for you, candidates would need to decide which specific exam area they would want to focus on and then apply to only that one area. And you will see specifically in the job openings that it indicates that candidates would be disqualified if they in fact submit applications for more than one exam area. So that is an important point to understand. Again, so candidates would need to select to apply to either legal affairs, social affairs, or statistics only. So here's just a quick snapshot of the timeline that you can expect. As I had mentioned, we're hoping later this week or next week to open up the job openings, and prior to them being open, we encourage you strongly to visit the careers.un.org YPP page to learn more about the process, to go to inspira.un.org and create an account and begin preparing your application. The application process for the UN is called a PHP, Personal History Profile, and it might be daunting for some if they have not completed a PHP for UN application previously. So we really do encourage you to take your time and make sure that it is completed appropriately. You'll see here on the timeline also that the application period will be open through August, or until August. So the openings are published for 60 days. So candidates will have 2 months during which they can prepare their application. And it is important to note that you cannot modify your application once it is submitted. So before you go ahead and click that submit button, you just want to make sure that it is thoroughly and appropriately completed. So it is a good idea to take your time on it. Following the closing of the posting, we will screen the applications based on just those 4 basic criteria. Candidates would be invited come September, October. We would provide a link to the online testing platform for any candidates that are invited to participate in the process, so they can test the testing platform essentially. They can go and see how their internet connection is and familiarize themselves with the layout of what the platform looks like. And that will happen a few weeks in advance of the test so that candidates have enough time to really test it and test their connection. Then in October, they would complete that first part of the online exam. Again, that would be the general paper and the multiple choice questions. Then in December, candidates would be invited for the second stage of online exam. And then in May or June of 2019 is when interviews would be conducted. So there is a bit of a lengthy process, we recognize, to go through YPP exams. And this is because we really do involve our substantive departments here in, first off, the test development, but then they are also the ones that are marking the exams, the open-ended constructed response items. So it does take time. We have our experts in DESA, for example, in the development pillar that are marking the social affairs and statistics exams. So it does take some time from when you complete your exam in December until we move forward to the interview process. And then we would notify applicants of results starting in June of the next year. It is close to a 1-year process altogether. We are hoping, in fact, to gain some efficiencies by moving online, but this is our estimate with all of the safe buffers in place right now. So then what happens for those that have been successful in completing the exam online and successful in the interview process? They would be placed on a roster and then eligible for consideration for positions at the P1 or P2 level in any secretariat duty station and some peacekeeping operations as well. So there are YPP positions across the secretariat. Something actually that I want to make sure is clear here, Nanaya started off the presentation talking about how the UN family is very broad and includes many different funds, programs, and agencies. And YPP, as I have been describing it, this one is specific to Secretariat. So there are some other YPP out there that might be run for different funds or program or agencies, but this is specific to Secretariat, which covers, again, a wide majority of positions. So I see a question that popped up about family member working in the UN. Can you still apply? If you have a spouse working in the UN, yes, you can apply. If you have another immediate family member, then no, you cannot apply exactly. This is a constraint that exists for internships, but really also for all of the positions here at the UN. You will see that as a screening question and eligibility matter for positions across the UN. So going back to the roster, again, those that are successful throughout the whole exam process would be placed on a roster. That roster has a lifespan of 3 years. And it's over the course of those 3 years as vacancies come up for these P2 positions that individuals would be selected off of the roster and placed into those positions. I have seen it happen that a candidate has been selected and placed into a position the day after the roster is established, but sometimes it can also take the full 3 years of the roster life cycle for a candidate to be selected and placed into a position. So it is just important to have that that expectation and that frame of mind when you're going again and applying to YPP, that you are not applying for any one specific vacancy. You're applying to be able to participate in this exam process and then to ultimately be placed on a roster and then have the opportunity to really begin a career here with the UN. And this is something that we see when candidates come in through YPP, that they really do end up staying with the organization and making a career for themselves. The management here in the organization thinks very highly of those that make it through YPP exams because they do understand what a rigorous process it is. So it's a very unique opportunity, and we're very excited for you all to be with us today to hear more about it and to be able to help spread the word.
Okay, great. So it's Nanai here again, and we just have a couple more slides before we end and can take more of your questions. So in terms, I understand that we do have some APSIA staff with us today, and so this is specifically for them in terms of how you can help us in promoting the Young Professionals program to your students within your universities and colleges. And so following this presentation, all APSIA staff are going to be receiving a link to our YPP communications package in order to help us identify young talent within your university programs. And the communications package will include everything you see here, including a link to the YPP website, which will serve as the main gateway to all information about the YPP. So any updates or any information or any of the job, or when the job openings are posted, all of that will be placed on the YPP website for both applicants as well as for staff and promoters of the YPP program as well. You'll also receive a flyer to promote YPP, which can be distributed electronically or in print. You'll receive a press release template, which can be used for relevant media within your university, as well as a website text template in order to promote YPP on appropriate university web pages. And finally, links to our social media, and we ask that all focal points are encouraged to reshare YPP content from the UN Careers Facebook or Twitter accounts on your university social media platforms. So we will also be sending out a link to Carmen that can forward it to everyone on the webinar today with additional resources about UN careers opportunities for students as well following the presentation. So you can keep up to date with all new information on
Well, thanks for your patience. I'm sure that Julian and I will reboot their audio in just 1 minute. And then we'll be wrapping up and able to take your questions, and they're back.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, we're back here. So yeah, basically just to say that these are the ways that you can contact us and stay up to date on information regarding YPP. And with that being said, Julie and I are both here to take any questions you have about YPP or opportunities for young professionals in general. So thank you to Carmen and to everyone on the webinar today for joining us.
And sorry that our connection has been so choppy.
It's that cutting edge UN technology. So I'm seeing a number of questions, particularly about the criteria. But I wanted to go back to one of our earliest questions, which was whether the slides and the recording will be available, and the answer to both is yes. So those of you who've been taking notes vigorously, fear not. But there have been a number of questions, as I said, about the different criteria, so I'll try my best to group them all together and ask both of you to respond first about YPP, but also about applications in general. So there have been a number of questions about what counts for work experience and whether things like paid internships are distinguished from unpaid, consultancies, field research. Are there explanations in the materials about how to define full-time, part-time, and internship that students and staff should be aware of?
Yeah, so first off, I would just say it all counts. So to quote you, Carmen, fear not. Everything counts. All of your experience is relevant, but it does differ in terms of, like I said, the number of points essentially that are going to be associated with your application. So first off is just to make sure that you are really accurately reflecting exactly what your experience has been, because it can be, verified later on, and you want to make sure that what you are putting in, again, is just a perfect reflection of what you have done. But to really better understand it, I would encourage folks when they are in Inspira, there is an applicant manual, and it is pretty lengthy, but it will give you all the information needed about completing that specific PHP, the process, and as it is required for the UN. There's also on the careers page a link for tips on how to complete a PHP specifically for the UN. So I would just recommend really everybody, as you have these very good questions that you're asking, and it's clear that everybody understands that it is a bit of a different application process. So really just take the time to educate yourself. Look on the careers portal. There's a lot of information there on completing applications for the UN, on participating in interviews for the UN, because that also can be somewhat of a different process than what might happen in the private sector, for example. And then also on the Inspira page itself, there is an applicant manual.
Is there a different level of counting for positions like JPO, or is it essentially similar?
It's similar. It's pretty much exactly the same, because even as a JPO, you would apply using the UN personal history profile form. So it's exactly the same for JPOs as well.
And once folks have made it through all the process and they're on the roster, can they update their information then, or is it still set in stone from when they submitted a year earlier?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, they can absolutely update it, even because there is a significant time difference from when they first apply for YPP until the interview process. We do, even before the interviews, we will collect an updated PHP if candidates wish to do so at that time. And then, yes, once they're on the roster, they will have a relationship with our staffing services team, and they will keep the successful candidates up to date as positions open up, and they would also collect updated PHPs at that time.
Great. And I'm glad you all brought back the participating countries slide, because I think that's a number of the other questions that we have. So could you clarify again, if someone is a dual national, which nationality they should emphasize, or if someone is a naturalized citizen, how they should handle that aspect?
Yeah, so if you have dual nationality, I would just recommend as a tip here, essentially, with whatever nationality you prefer to go with is up to the individual. But in terms of pure numbers, it is recommended to use the nationality of the country that would likely have fewer applicants. So that's why I was saying, if you have a dual nationality with US as one of your nationalities, I would recommend emphasizing your nationality for the application purposes as the other nationality than US.
Although just to point out too, I saw someone said that they're US and Italian. So does that mean that they should use their Italian nationality? Just keep in mind that what you see on this slide here, these are the only countries that are invited to participate in the YPP program. Italy is not one of those countries. So if you only have Italian and US citizenship, you would choose US because that's the country that's been invited to participate.
Yeah.
And how often does the country list change?
Every year it changes. So just as every year we take a look at what the organization's needs are and which exam areas will be offered, we would also take a look at the representation status of the countries, and again, only those that are un or underrepresented in the UN or at risk of becoming un or underrepresented in the next couple of years due to anticipated retirements, those are the ones that would be included.
Great. We have a few more questions in a few more minutes, so hopefully we can match those together. One question was about that I saw earlier was about the online process. Since everything is now online, is each stage a gatekeeper? So you have to pass stage 1 with the multiple choice and the general paper to get to stage 2? Or if you're invited, do you automatically get to do both stages?
It is a hurdle process, yeah. So you must pass the first online stage to be able to then be invited to the second online stage, and then must pass that second online stage to be invited for the interviews.
Great. We also have a student who is applying to be a JPO from her country, but was wondering if she can also apply for YPP as long as she negotiates with her government.
Yes, absolutely.
And is there a limited number of times? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's exactly that. I saw that question pop up, so I was just going to answer that. There is not a limit to the number of times that you can take the exam over the years. It will not be known if you are retaking, from one year to the next year. Everything, once the candidate has been invited and we are up to the scoring process, everything is marked anonymously. So there's no self-identifying information that is shared with any of those that are grading papers. It's really just a matter in terms of the limit of the number of times that you could take the exam. As long as you are still 32 or under, then yes, you may continue to retake it over the years.
See a few more people typing. There we go. Is there a guarantee if you're on the roster you will get a job offer within 3 years, and are multiple offers ever extended?
So unfortunately, no, it is not a guarantee that if you're on the roster, you will get an offer within 3 years. We do make every effort possible to place everybody that is on the roster. Previously, the roster only had a life of 2 years, and we were noticing that all candidates were not necessarily making it off of the roster into a position. So for that reason, just in the last couple of years, it has been extended to a 3-year lifetime. And with that, we're really hoping that we will get closer to the guarantee. But it's really just a matter of positions becoming available. And so if people are not moving out of their P2 position, then we might not have a vacancy. We do try as best we can to target that number of how many to put on the roster based on how many vacancies will come up over the 3-year period, but it's not an exact science. And in terms of multiple offers, I couldn't say honestly, but I would think that if a candidate profile fits for several different positions, then they would be asked their interest. So the way that typically it offers that people are placed is 4 times a year, the staffing service will run an exercise, a staffing exercise to fill the P2 positions. So if a candidate, as those positions open up, are interested in multiple, or their profile fits multiple and there are different managers who are interested, then yes, it could happen that there would be multiple offers to select from.
So we have time for just a few more questions. Julie, I think you talked a bit about the ability to update profiles once they're in this past all of the hurdles, but when they're on the roster, can they still adjust their profile?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So it looks like this is going to be our last question for today, and then I'm sure I know there's lots more resources online, and we'll have a recording and the slides as well for everyone. So Maria says she's working on a research paper looking at nutrition in food. So Maria, I think that's a really specific question, but one that's not necessarily related to YPP. So I'll encourage you to follow up with some UN colleagues through a different channel to get that data on malnutrition and undernourishment in those countries. But we appreciate everyone's time, especially our speakers. Thank you so much for the clear and straightforward walk through the process. I hope you will see lots of applications from the students who are online, as well as APSIA students around the world, and will deepen and increase the presence of APSIA at the UN that's currently so well exemplified by our speakers and other alum, and by so many others who do great work around the world to advance the SDGs. Thank you to everyone for your time, and thank you especially to our speakers for their wisdom. We'll follow up soon with all of those great resources and wish you all the best of luck with the competitive process.